Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Salesforce Business Analyst Virtual Trailblazer Community Group. Today we are welcoming Laura Brandenburg to go through the Business Analyst Framework for Success. We're happy you are here, and I am happy to get us kicked off here. First, with some housekeeping items. The meeting will be recorded, edited, and posted on YouTube. When I have a second, could be tomorrow, could be a month from now. Keeps it exciting, so just keep checking that channel. Um, Also, please, folks, in the chat, please feel free to be active in the chat. We will do our best to keep up, but don't spam. Certainly, if there's something really great posted in there, we will do our best to pin exciting posts. Q&A for questions. I'm actually going to turn on Q&A now. So if there are questions at the end of the session, we will go through the Q&A. And yeah, so our agenda today, we've got introductions. We're going to go through Laura's session, the Business Analyst Framework for Success, go through some of that Q&A, go through some Salesforce BA news and opportunities, and then we're going to have some unfiltered recording off Badass BA chit chat. I am your hostess with the mostest, recently recovering from an Agentforce implementation. My name is Vanessa Grant. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 15 years, certified Scrum Master. I've also worked on a couple of those credentials that you've studied really hard for. If there were any questions you did not like, those were not the ones that I worked on. And I've been a product owner. Right now, I'm kind of doing my own thing. So freelancing and enjoying my solo baba-ness. And I am joined by the lovely...
Hello, my name is Payman Lim. I have been in the software delivery space, consulting space for about 30 years now. First half in the Microsoft space, and the last half in Salesforce. I've done almost everything except being a developer because I was really crap at that. But I can talk the lingo, and if you're a dev, you cannot BS me. I have also written 3 books, Salesforce Discovery 101, Salesforce Projects 101, in Salesforce Consulting 101. The purple book, if you've got my purple book, and I know a lot of people have, and a lot of people like it, can you drop me an Amazon review because someone gave me a 1 star and didn't write anything, and I'm like super sad. Please tell me why you didn't like it so that I can do better next time, not because I'm going to get my revenge on you, but not that I can anyway. So that's me. Let's hand it over to Laura.
Sorry, I was busy holding books. Okay. So we have Laura Brandenburg today, and I just want to throw a little story out here. So I don't know if folks are familiar with how I've discovered business analysis. I've been doing business analysis work for a long time, but I didn't actually have the vocabulary for it, which is why I always stress, especially when you come to these types of meetings, make sure that you are picking up the vocabulary, write it down, look it up later, dig into it. So I had gotten laid off back in 2017. I was just a VP of business ops, which is great. It's wonderful, but I didn't know I was doing business analysis work because I didn't have the vocabulary for that. I did like some side hustle as a DocuSign consultant. It was a weird time in my life. But they sat me next to the IT business analyst. And I said, "Oh, business analyst, what do you do?" And she explained her job to me. And I was like, that sounds a lot like what I do. And so I Googled Salesforce Business Analysis, and that is how my career was born. But there were not a whole lot of places to learn about business analysis. And that is where I learned about Laura Brandenburg, who came into my life as one of the major content creators that really helped me dig into business analysis. So much so that when I got my first Salesforce BA gig, I paid for her templates, and I had one of those jobs where like I interviewed on a Friday and was in front of a multi-billion-dollar client on a Tuesday. And I will say Laura's templates completely made me sound like I knew what I was talking about. And like I kept going to her Bridging the Gap site to get me through it. So starting off with a thank you so much, Laura, for all of your great content. And I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for that story, Vanessa. And I'm so glad that we're like connecting for real now.
Yeah.
Like, real conversation. Yeah.
All right, so I know Laura's going to introduce herself a little bit more in her session, which is going to happen as soon as I can figure out how to stop sharing. All right.
As soon as I can figure out how to start sharing, which I think we good there.
There we are.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me and for being here. I have been, I'm not part of the Salesforce community, but we have had enough Salesforce BAs go through our program that I feel like I have this energetic connection to the Salesforce community, as well as my husband is a Salesforce architect, Salesforce developer. And so every once in a while I glean sort of the things that are happening in the Salesforce world from his perspective as well. So I'm really glad to be here. And I feel like where I'm, my background is firmly in the business analysis arena, and I'm looking forward to bringing kind of more awareness of the BA profession and the BA discipline here to this group, which obviously as Salesforce BAs, you're in that intersection, right? So I would actually love if you do have a chance to share in the chat, what type of role are you in? Are you Salesforce BA? Are you an admin doing a little bit of BA? Are you a BA thinking about Salesforce? So that's why you're here, right? We kind of see a mix. So if you are able to share, that would be great. It's always kind of a good to kind of get a sense. So a lot of admins doing some BAs, Salesforce analyst, certified, trying to find a work. Okay. Admin aiming for BA. Okay, so lots of more on the admin side looking to do more business analysis and a bit vice versa as well. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. So Vanessa already shared these key bullet points. I will just add, I've started bridging the gap 17 years ago now. It's like I never had a job in corporate that lasted more than 3 or 4 years. So the fact that I've been in my own company for 17 years is sort of a bit mind-blowing at times, but I just fell in love with teaching business analysis and continuing to be part of this community. And it's been really I will say, just to call attention to the final piece on this slide about empowering business analysts to amplify their impact and thrive in their careers is what keeps me going. It's a big reason behind my latest book, The Value-Driven Business Analyst, which Vanessa had up on her slides as well. And it really teaches the framework that we're going to talk about today. So today we're here to go over the key responsibilities of a business analyst and specifically how that work adds value to an organization, to look at the business analysis techniques and practices that support each of those 8 steps, and also some quick tips for how to leverage generative AI to get up to speed quickly. Now, I think this group, more than a lot of other groups that I have spoken to, is probably very AI aware. I'm still seeing in a lot of BA circles, either resistance to AI or organizations not quite set up to use AI yet. So the AI piece, I'll be kind of interested in your where are you pushing the needle on AI, right? You're already implementing agents in a lot of cases, but I think as Vanessa was saying in kind of the early part, we really need to be looking at where is AI going to create business value, and that's where business analysts can add a lot of value and discipline as we have this scatter to just make everything AI enabled. So on that topic, what is a value-driven business analyst, right? So what do we mean by that? And there's some pieces that I talk about in the book that I think really define what separates a value-driven business analyst from maybe a run-of-the-mill or kind of general business analyst. I think we reduce rework. So we really aim to reduce rework by ensuring the requirements are captured, I would say captured and communicated, right? So we're focused on the requirements, but in that sense of how do we make sure this is clear and complete for everyone? Because we're really, the value add there is reducing the rework or the churn that happens when we're not clear on what needs to happen or people kind of go off in multiple directions. we're focused on solving the underlying business problem. People might come to us asking to add a field to a form. We're going to ask, why do you need that? And how are you going to use that? Right? So we're focusing on the problem behind the solution and making sure that we're solving that problem. Again, it's a way of reducing rework as well. But we also need to thrive in fast-paced environments by choosing the right techniques at the right times. So I have never been one of those BAs that kind of throws the entire book at a project, or like, you need this big 25-page template, or you've done everything wrong, right? It's like, what techniques do we need to solve this problem and to communicate the requirements really clearly, and to analyze and to think through the problem as well. A value-driven BA would also cultivate credibility with a flexible but structured approach. We're going to go through that today, but there is a balance between not throwing the whole, abstract sense of business analysis at everything, but also having enough of an approach and some structure that you are seen as somebody credible who can be consistent and generate consistent results along a wide variety of projects. Part of that is managing expectations to articulate a complete picture of what business analysis needs to happen, and be really proactive in engaging your stakeholders. And then finally, working strategically and intentionally to build momentum while minimizing risk. So this is a big ask, right? And I think all of us probably could find a few that were like, yeah, I'm really, really good at that. And here's an area that I might want to improve upon. And so that's how I would invite you to consider this list, not as like, oh, if I'm not doing all of these things, I'm somehow wrong as a VA, but what is the one or two where I could like lean into that a little bit more and use that as a touchstone to move my career forward, my discipline forward, my profession forward, and my organization. And I just want to say that this doesn't mean that there's not challenges. Part of the reason why I think we need a rally cry for value-driven business analysis right now is because we face so many challenges, right? We are under aggressive timelines with not enough time to do the right analysis. We're often assigned late in the project, so after important decisions have been made, which really minimizes the impact that we can make. We are often in an unclear role or an overlap with other roles or layering on. So those of you who are like, I'm an admin looking to move to BA, being an admin and a BA and a developer and like the configuration manager is not unheard of, or like the project manager, product owner, BA, right? So like these roles are unclear, and part of the process is really taking some time to clarify our roles. We might have stakeholders who are not engaged, declining our meetings, ignoring messages, not really having answers to the questions. And so that's a big issue we need to deal with. And I will say all of these external factors, I tend to see them leading into a sense of a lack of confidence, which is more of a personal, personal thing. But when you have this kind of ambiguity and late deadlines and disengaged stakeholders, it kind of feels like, oh, I must be doing something wrong, versus like there's something about this environment that is messed up and causing all these challenges. And so I think part of what I want to do today is kind of pull apart the pieces of what are the pieces that you can really take control of with a structure, and where are the pieces that it's really your external environment and it's truly not your fault, right? So kind of having that balance is really important. So I would just invite you to share too, whether it's in the Q&A tab for the end, or if there's something quick you want to share in the chat now, like, are there other challenges? And as we go through today, are there other challenges that are coming up for you in terms of being a value-driven BA? And I would love to have a conversation around that. Vanessa just put a note about the book, and part of what's been fun about writing the book is one, being done, because it's been like on my mind for 5 years, but also like realizing that now the mission is more about having conversations around it versus just needing to focus all my energy into writing it. And so I love to kind of have those conversations in environments like this. Okay, so that brings us to the BA framework, and this is the 8-step business analysis process. It is the foundation of the book. Like each of these steps gets a chapter in the book with additional chapters for some of the techniques and tutorials around that. But really the goal of the framework is to help you establish that kind of credibility, bring just enough structure. And I'm going to go through this at a high level, and then we'll dive deeper into each of these steps. So step one is getting oriented, just learning just enough to make an impact, right? And to start discovering the business objectives. And that business objective step is when we ask why and make sure we understand what problem needs to be solved. From there, we can start looking at solution options and gaining agreement on the scope of the project. And from there, we can then figure out our business analysis plan. So unless we are also project managers, this plan would be our business analysis deliverables, what stakeholders need to be involved, what the timelines look like. So not the overall project plan, but what the business analysis work effort is. From there, we actually do what most people think of as business analysis, which is all the detailed requirements. So discovering, analyzing, validating, whether that's the process or the actual features that we're adding to Salesforce or the data, like all of those pieces that are the detailed requirements. A lot of us feel tempted to skip right to this step. And what happens if you are in like rehashing over and over again the same kind of deliverables or the same requirements and not getting alignment, it's often because those earlier steps, there's not a good alignment around. So those early steps feel like they're slowing things down, but in the long run, they actually speed things up. And that's a big message that I think it's important for the BA community to be sharing and kind of promoting as we promote this version of the profession. From there, we kind of take a step back and we're more in a support role. So we support the technical team and the implementation, making sure that it's going to meet the actual business objectives. The same with the business, making sure they can actually absorb the solution and change in alignment with the solution to meet the business objectives. And we get to look at the value that we created. What's the ROI of the solution? And really, we should be doing touchstones along this all along the way. So I teach this as a linear process because our brains can only hold so many things at a time. The reality is that we're often in multiple steps of the process, particularly if we're on an agile team where we're like active in a, whatever the next couple sprints are, but also maybe doing long-term planning on what we're going to be working on 6 months from now. So we might be in different steps at the same time, and that's okay, but just kind of using this as a grounding force to kind of let us know, like, where am I at now? How does this fit into the overall flow? It's perfectly usable in an agile team. It doesn't look agile because it's so linear, but agile teams need the business analysis as well. And we really intersect there at the BA plan and the detailed requirements. Like the BA plan could be your product backlog and the detailed requirements could be your user stories, right? And we'll get into some more of that. But if you have specific questions around how to apply this in agile, happy to chat about that as well. And then finally, just consider it a guide, not a prescription, right? You're often going to iterate through the steps. And it's a touchstone of like, am I on the right track versus I have to do this first or I somehow failed. So what kind of projects can this work on? And these are some of the Salesforce projects that I'm familiar with based on kind of the experience with the community I shared. I'd also be really interested to hear what kind of projects that you're working on in Salesforce or in your business analysis roles. So it could be configuring a new workflow, right? When you have a new workflow, we want to start with what's the problems it's trying to solve, what's the scope of this, and then get into those step-by-step details. You could be in a project where you're transitioning either to Salesforce from another tool or from a set of spreadsheets or from Salesforce to another tool, right? And when we're migrating from one system to another, we need to understand the business processes, how to configure that system to support those business processes, and then often also migrating data and integrating data between systems. And we'll talk a little bit about those techniques. It could be generating a report. We actually have a team of BAs who go through the whole framework, and one of our courses around the framework is part of their onboarding, and they are BI analysts focusing on building new reports. And I talked to their manager and I was like, that's a really interesting way to orient these BAs. Like, what do you see as the reason behind that? And she's like, well, before we even start setting up the report, I want them to understand where that knowledge request, like not the report, but where does the user need that information? And what are they doing? Like, what's their business process when they have that question that they're trying to get the report to answer, right? So that's the why. And then they start by looking at what the report might look like and what the data is, and does the data actually answer that question? And then they get into mocking up the report and finally building the report. So she really trains them to think big picture and big holistically, even though their main work is generating reports. And it could be as simple as adding a field. So those were some bigger projects, but even when we're adding a field, right? Why are we adding this field? How does it fit into the business process? What do we need that field stored? What are we going to do with that piece of information, right? So every little small request, we can still treat that through that whole lens of the business analysis framework. And it just means we might do it in the span of a meeting or two, as opposed to, a multi-month project, like a larger initiative. And so what else? Do you have any other examples? I kind of see a few things in the chat here. Vanessa says, one I've done moving from Classic to Lightning. So that would be like my migration, implementing Salesforce. Oops. Oh, I see. Merging two Salesforce orgs, adding a new cloud. So lots of different things. Michelle, I prefer TQM, which places the internal customer at the center of the analysis, creating personas and journey maps. Okay. Evaluating JDBT using SIPOC. So yeah, SIPOC is another way of doing business process analysis, examining the data. Yeah, so a lot of what we'll talk about today is parallel to that. I don't have training on personas and journey maps specifically, but definitely business process and use cases, which can accomplish a lot of the similar objectives. So again, it's not so much, I just want to emphasize, about the techniques, but when you're thinking about this, it's like, when am I making these decisions? So the 8-step process is not really a set of techniques. I do have a set of techniques that I'm going to show you when we get there, but it's a framework of how am I moving through these decisions to achieve value as a BA in an organization. Okay. All right. So let's talk about step 1, getting oriented. I just see the joke. You have a process. Okay, yes. And Priya says process optimizing. So perfect use of the framework. All right. So when you get oriented, there's a few different aspects of this. So this is step 1, right? And you can't, the piece of it, you can't deliver value unless you know where you are and where you're headed. And not all movement is movement in the right direction. So we can be really busy, we can be really overwhelmed, we can feel really overworked. It's everything we're doing actually achieving the outcome that we're looking to achieve. And often that can be lack of clarity of our roles. So taking a moment, especially on a new team, on a new project, to just, what is my role here? What are the deliverables in place here? What is the set of responsibilities for this role is really important. Not to make an assumption about that. Most of the mistakes that I've made in my career is because I made an assumption about my role based on a prior team. And then that caused friction with somebody who thought they were doing those things, or there was a piece I didn't do because I didn't think it was mine. So taking that opportunity to clarify a role up front is really important, as is knowing how to figure out the primary stakeholders, understand what's happened so far, so that even if you have to repeat the work that another BA has done, you can at least speak to that and explain why. And then very importantly is understanding the existing systems and processes. So if you are in the scope of moving from non-Salesforce to Salesforce, that would be, what are the current processes that are in place today, or even a version of Salesforce to another. How is that system set up today? What are the business processes around it, so that you have a baseline of what exists and how you might want to move that forward. And then that brings us to step 2. So if our goal is to deliver value, we need to understand what value looks like in the context of this work. And that means discovering the primary business objectives. So I typically call them objectives, but I just want to acknowledge they have a lot of different names. So you might be doing this work or your organization might have a place where this happens that is just different. It's called something different. So it's not so much about what it's called, but are we having this conversation? So some organizations call them business requirements, business needs, desired outcomes, the return on investment, the key performance indicators, right? Those would all be ways of talking about the why, the business objectives. Why are we doing this? And equally, they could be in a variety of different deliverables. I'm going to speak to and show an example of a scope statement here in a minute. That's the piece we teach because I just like that deliverable. It's very streamlined, but it could be a business case. It could be a project charter. It could be an epic. It could be, your just project initiation document, right? So it's less about, again, the specific deliverable, but is there a place on the team where people are clarifying why we're making this investment? And that's what you want to make sure. And if not, is there an early document that is circulated and paid attention to early in an initiative that you could add a section for business objectives for? Often that's a much easier next step to kind of embrace this step versus trying to add a whole new document, just kind of adding a section to a current document. So what they could look like. So this is an example of a set of business objectives. You're really aiming for 2 to 5 objectives that are actionable and clear, and they need to fit together logically. And they need to give guidance of what the scope would look like, not so much what the scope is, but what we're solving that gives enough context for the team to be granular about, oh, this is going to be a new field, or it's going to be a new workflow, or we could solve this with this type of solution, right? So here we have a few different objectives for a mobile application for a home insurance company. So we could reduce the average time a claim agent spends preparing to submit a claim. We could reduce follow-up calls to check on status, reduce calls by contractors, and then increase adoption of homeowner use of the online application by a certain amount. So that kind of gives us a guidance of like what features would we need to focus on to achieve those objectives without being specific of what the features are, right? So your business objectives shouldn't ideally be implement a new CRM, even though we know that's often the solution or implement a new workflow. What is the outcome once that workflow is in place? And that's what you want to get to, because that allows you to vet that the solution actually is going to solve the intended problem. Now, this is a great place to use generative AI, right? So you can describe your project and ask for ideas. I often find also like business stakeholders, like they know what they want and they have a sense of why they want it, but they have trouble putting that into words. So when we just ask why, they kind of get stuck. But if you could generate, kind of ask for some examples and show them some ideas. Do these resonate? Is this what we're looking for? Could we put a number around this? And start to get a little bit more clear. And that can be a great way to start the conversation. And this brings us to defining scope. So this is a snapshot. This is a free template that you can download through Bridging the Gap. The link is there. But when we're talking about scope, we're talking about making the business needs tangible in a way that everyone on the team can envision what their contribution might be. And so we've got to take the why and break it down into the what, the capabilities, right? So there's a section here for a general overview project, like your elevator statement. There's a section here for expected benefits. So that would be the objectives that we just talked about. And then the capabilities, like what are we actually going to achieve and build, both from a technology perspective and also a business process perspective. What assumptions are we making about the solution? Like if you are adding a workflow, you're probably assuming it's going to be added to Salesforce. Like you're not going to revisit is Salesforce our right CRM every time that you have a project, right? You're going to assume it's going to be done in Salesforce unless you're really taking a big step back and looking at your entire system architecture. And that might bring up some constraints. Like what are the constraints when you're designing a new workflow or using this particular AI agent that you need to take into account? And then very importantly, what is out of scope? or what are we not going to do. I like to put anything that anybody has brought up that we've decided is out of scope just as a reminder, because people tend to like, oh, I brought that up in that meeting, right? Didn't we say it was going to be there? And yeah, we did talk about it and we had to put it out of scope, right? So you kind of have that touchstone that helps you as well to keep everything on track. And again, where this gets documented is less important than having some sort of clear vision for this and some sort of it really does take a deliverable to capture this, but it could be in an epic, it could be an agile plan for like the next few months. Here's what we're going to focus on for the next few months. But it just kind of gives you that sense of where we're headed and how everybody can contribute. And then finally, I just wanted to share one of my favorite prompt templates, and you can use this for just about any deliverable. We have a bunch of them inside my training programs now, but what I like to do and what we found really helps is to use, so if you notice that template had all that blue text is annotations. So it's like the equivalent of training an AI agent or a person, because we sold them to people before we sold them to use them to train AI, like what goes in this section. And so I found when I upload an annotated template, and people have done this in Copilot, they've done it in ChatGPT, any text-based generative AI tool, and then say, use this template to give me a draft of a document, and of course, whatever contextual information you can give. I also love to ask it to please include questions that I should be thinking about as well. And that can give me that great first draft to go from. And again, that's just about not having to start from a blank page. So be curious if you all are using templates to train AI, or if that's something new. I feel like I've been talking about that for a while. It might be old news at this point, but it just like creates such an amplifier effect in terms of the like getting what you want out of an AI agent or an AI prompt. Michelle says requirements traceability is important, especially in Matrix. Yeah, so we'll get to that in the detailed requirements as you kind of move through to the details. Okay, another piece that I really like a quick diagram that I like to use in this phase is a system context diagram. So in here, you could have like your Salesforce as the center system. In this case, I was creating a custom, or I was speccing the requirements for a custom customer-facing portal. And then we showed how all these interacting systems and how data flowed from and to that system. And this is a really relatively simple diagram that starts to clarify boundaries and interactions. And my experience has been these are the requirements that get missed in the early stages and that add complexity at the end that kind of derail project timelines. So getting some clarity on what systems we need to integrate with and how that data flows, before we even get to field mappings and all of that, can really help bring some clarity to the scope of a project. And Hildy says, I trained my ChatGPT with tone and with a template. Great. That's a great practice. Okay, so that brings us to the business analysis plan. And this is probably the step I face the most resistance from, because business analysis is really hard to plan. And part of the reason it's hard to plan is because we are peeling an onion and we do not know what's inside the onion. And so we peel off a layer and then there's something new. Like we are literally taking an ambiguity and bringing clarity, right? So what we can do here, though, is surface a plan that makes a lot of assumptions and that gives a sense of what we need to do and how we need to get there. And if nobody else does the plan, or if we don't do the plan, somebody's just going to give us a date, and that's probably going to be less realistic than what we come up with for ourselves. So that plan should include the types of deliverables. So given the scope, do I need to analyze processes, write use cases, work on a user story, right? It should have the specific deliverables. So, this could be your product backlog, all the different user stories that are part of the project. It could be a list of use cases if you're using that, or your data flow models, or your business processes. And then a really key element is what stakeholders need to be involved in what deliverables. So this is where often we get derailed, where stakeholders aren't engaged because they didn't know how much of their time is going to be needed to get the thing they wanted. They thought they could sit down, have a single discussion, and everything would just magically appear, like 3 to 5 months later, right? So having a plan where we can show their involvement helps set those expectations, and then also then backing into the timelines. So here's what that plan could look like. Here we've got all our specific deliverable names. And then what I have really enjoyed using a generative AI for here too is once you get your effort and your duration, and if you have a start date, you need your effort, duration, start date, and any dependencies to show, like, I can't start on this one before that one. So you can put that into AI and ask it to then give you all the dates for all the deliverables. And often you'll look at that and be like, that's not right. And so that helps you articulate either additional dependencies you weren't clear about or additional assumptions you're making. Often it's, well, actually, I'm only working on this project 10 hours a week. So like redo the plan, giving me 10 hours a week to work on this project, and that will extend the timeline, right? So that's a great place to use AI, and it's really can be co-collaborative that way, because as you see what it creates for you, it might help you realize some additional information that you need to communicate about risk. Okay, and I'll just pause for a moment. I've been talking for a bit. Any questions? Anything, like any big picture, like, wait, I'm not, not clear on that before we move on? Vanessa, I really need to use this. People usually go, hey, can you do things by this date? Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Even a light version of like, here's what it would look like, right? Okay. And Tony, I like to mix depending on placement. I think, somebody was talking about like not liking the curved correctors. Yeah. I mean, you can do it with straight lines. Again, I'm not like a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist in a lot of ways, but when it comes to how we diagram, I think crooked lines are better than mindless, spending 10 minutes trying to get a perfect of a diagram that you should be putting in front of stakeholders and getting feedback on anyways. And that tends to be a bit of heresy in BA circles, but I think it's important that, again, the value add, right? Is the value add in the perfect line, or is the value add in kind of general communication and iterative redoing of that based on feedback? Okay. Review and vibes instead of review and validation. Yeah, I'm kind of that's a good one. All right. We can maybe bring that through as we go through this. So step 5, this is like that bulk of the BA work, right? And I just want to emphasize here, we're not done with the discovery, even though we did a lot of discovery in the early steps. We still discover more details here. We might sit down and really go through that current state process in a lot of detail, or turn it into a future state. We're getting into the details of what specifically needs to be implemented, and what does the implementation team need from the BA in order to deliver a successful result. And that is going to shift based on your team, right? It's going to shift based on the type of solution. And it's going to shift if you are the admin and you're doing some of the setup, like the detail you need might be different than the detail you would need to give somebody else. And so just really being cognizant of like, what are the details that team needs, and how is it going to support them? And using that to choose a set of deliverables that really gives them those details. So we still go through that discovery, the analysis of, thinking it through, and I'm going to share some techniques that really help with the analysis, and then the review and validation, or the review and the vibing of like, is everybody really on the same page with this? But what you're looking for there is from a developer to say, yes, this is feasible, and for a business person to say, yes, this is what I want, right? And yes, I'm going to be happy with this when I get it. And if not, then we go back and do some more discovery. So this is when we talk about what techniques we can use to do this, this is our larger framework of all the techniques that I teach through Bridging the Gap. And so we've been talking about that bar along the bottom, the 8-step business analysis process, which is really like the foundation. But from a technique perspective, looking at the business process, we've been kind of seeding this along the way, looking at the software. I really love use cases. I know use cases are either in or out of vogue, depending on where you're at. But what I like about a use case is that the analytical thinking that it forces you to do to put requirements into a user does this and the system does that, right? And so once we have that and we've, when there's a break, there's an alternate flow, like your user stories will more naturally fall out of a really well-formed use case. And a lot of BAs are great at use case thinking, and then they can kind of just stitch that together into user stories. But really, if you're kind of struggling with like, how do these user stories all fit together, going to a bigger picture document like a use case or maybe a process flow diagram to help stitch all those things together is really an essential piece. And I think it gets looked at in an agile environment often, that we need these bigger picture views to really hold the requirements together, but also to think through the implications and the impacts versus kind of looking at one little piece at a time. We need that time to kind of look at the whole view. Equally from a data side. So most of the data diagrams here would not be specific to like one little piece of work. They would be an entity relationship diagram or a business domain model that covers an entire domain, or a data dictionary that covers like all the fields specific to a workflow, or maybe all the fields specific to an implementation, and how fields map together, whether we're migrating data one time into a system or setting up an interchange where it goes back and forth. So just, really key ways of thinking through the requirements that also then lead us to ask better questions and to get more clear on what we're actually implementing. So great ways to use generative AI here. We kind of talked about how to create a rough first draft. I've also had great success uploading a draft and asking it for either questions, like what other questions should I be asking? Or we decided to eliminate that step. Can you make the update and also look at all the impacts of that update across either a set of deliverables or this deliverable? You can also upload a draft and ask for ideas for how to improve, right? So we used to have to come up with all this ourselves, and now like our thinking is still so important, but often kind of in that co-creative work with an AI tool, we can suggest things that we might not have thought of otherwise. And so that can be really important, really successful. All right, so just a step back, because we're going to kind of breeze through the last 3 steps, but there's an energetic shift here. So all along the way, like the pure BA role has been driving the process, and we step back now more into a support process. We're supporting the technical implementation, we're supporting the business implementing the solution, and we're helping them, and we're there available to them, but we're not necessarily in the driver's seat along the way. So what that looks like from a technical implementation, it could be reviewing designs or just sitting in on design meetings, which is a great way to learn about technical capabilities that you can use that information to help scoping future projects, reviewing test plans and test cases, answering questions as they come up, right? Things that we do naturally, but being available and kind of creating a communication path to make sure that people ask you questions versus making an assumption or going direct to the stakeholder who might not think through all of the impacts of a change, or kind of just like not think through kind of what was decided versus what was discussed. And then proactively managing issues. So, if a requirement becomes technically infeasible, how can we change that? What's the business impact of that? Some things that we can be doing in this step. And then also helping the business implement the solution. I kind of hate this story about a project I walked into that didn't have a BA, and it was a document management system. I tell the story in the book about, they were printing, they didn't understand how to use the tool, and it wasn't perfectly configured for them. And so the whole goal was to eliminate paper and to make the process more efficient. And this team in another location was printing twice, uploading twice, writing things on the paper, uploading it, because they didn't have the notes feature enabled the right way, and they didn't understand how to use that feature. And so, going through and helping sure the business understands how to use what was built whether that's supporting somebody in terms of a train the trainer, or doing some future state process analysis, or updating the assets, or kind of overseeing that work. It's really an important part of the scope of the project to make sure the business aspect is also taken into account, not just the software technology aspect. Otherwise, people go back and find workarounds and do business as usual and kind of do things their old way. And the solution actually makes it more difficult, and we don't get the ROI at the end. All right. And then finally at the end, like, a lot has happened, right? So we've worked through a lot of details, we've solved problems, we've detailed requirements, we've configured things. And so in this flurry of activity, we can lose track of the big picture. And why are we making all these changes? What value did they deliver to the organization? What were our original business objectives? And are we still on track with those? What did we actually achieve? And this creates a sense of positive momentum, a sense of team morale, a sense of good business and technology culture and supportive culture, right? So when we can actually look at what did we achieve, what is tangibly improved as a result of this project, and how can we celebrate that, as well as potentially suggest new projects that came up as a result. We always have the out of scope list, or the phase 2 list, or whatever you call it, like that bucket of things, that great ideas that came up that just did not get funded in this particular project. And so this is a great time. A lot of organizations are moving towards trying to use metrics for this. And I still, when I first put this course together 10, 12 years ago, that was in its barely in infancy. And today, I think some organizations are getting better, but the tracking and the awareness of how does this actually, save a particular cost, or reduce man hours, or reduce person hours, can really be hard to measure still and to track specifically. But you can certainly show, here's the steps we eliminated, or here's the steps we AI enabled in a business process, right? Here's the pieces that got simpler. Here's what the customers are saying, or the internal users are saying. So you can still really show that sense of value and tell the story of that value, even if you don't have metrics to support it. So I'll just kind of leave with the recap. Always like to kind of just digest the big picture again and what we talked about. And then with with my favorite mantras, on every successful project, you'll find a business analyst. They may not have the title. They might not even know they're doing the work, right? I've seen CTOs who are doing business analysis, creating successful projects that didn't know that that's what they were doing, right? But that somebody is collaborating with the business and tech team, creating a shared understanding and celebrating the results. And that could be you, if you want it to be you. So if you would, I have hopefully a good amount of time for questions. I also would invite you, if you want to explore this deeper, my book, The Value-Driven Business Analyst. It's available on Amazon, but when you go to that link below, you can register your purchase, and we have some reader bonuses. There's a whole implementation lab where I walk you through an assessment where you can kind of assess your BA practice, as well as a BA success pack with some annotated templates that you can use right away. And that leads us to open Q&A. Thank you so much, everybody. The chat has been great. And looking forward to any other questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Laura. Really appreciate it. The chat has been lit. We've been talking about adoption. We've been talking about enablement, how important that is. Executive sponsorship. It's brought up a lot.
For sure.
So thank you so much. I am looking at the Q&A, and you have been so thorough that we don't have any questions.
I see one from Abdul in the chat. Can we suggest new projects without selling?
Oh, yeah.
I think that it looks like you answered it a bit, but I think that we could talk about that one a little bit.
Absolutely.
Vanessa. Yeah. You want to share what you shared, and then I can kind of pivot off that, or?
So generally when I've been working on, especially if I'm internal on a Salesforce team, I oftentimes, over the course of a project, just because there are going to be things that are out of scope, or you also want to open up that feedback loop every time you deliver something. And so over the course of this, we're generally building a backlog. And so as far as coming up with that roadmap and working with your business stakeholders to figure out what the next thing is going to be in Salesforce, oftentimes I'll be adding things into that backlog, either tech debt or things that I've heard from other people. And I think it's absolutely I think imperative that business analysts take an active role in deciding what gets implemented, or fighting for the things that should be on the roadmap, advocating for those users and for the system.
For sure. And I think that's a great tactic to just have it there so that as people are reviewing the backlog and you're going through whatever kind of prioritization exercise, it's available. And I would also just encourage you to reframe the idea of selling, right? So sales has just such a negative connotation so often that we think sales is getting people to do things they don't want to do, as opposed to helping educate people of what the possibilities are so that they might make a better decision. And that is really what business analysis is when we're talking about how this all creates you. And it's just kind of getting out of the mindset of I have to push somebody, or I have to sell somebody, or I have to try to convince somebody, versus what information might people need to think about this differently, and how can I provide that in a useful way, and how can I have a conversation and discover what they really want and propose something that is really going to help them, right? And just kind of getting out of that mindset of the negativity around selling, for sure.
And we do have a question that came in from Dawn. It says, regarding stakeholder engagement, I could see their lack of engagement would significantly impact a project or project timeline. Do you have any suggestions or best practices to keep folks engaged?
Yeah, so you really part of it is just setting those expectations. So starting with the plan, right? Here's where I'll need you, but then where can you get into a rhythm of your requirements? So would this team be well served by a weekly meeting, right? And so having a weekly meeting on the calendar so everybody has space for it, and you're scheduling it out versus trying to schedule one meeting and then find another place on people's calendars, which might be a few weeks out. So it could be even more frequently than that on a very high priority project. But then having an agenda for that meeting. So you go into that meeting, and I suggest BAs budget when they're planning, they're estimating the BA plan, 3 to 4 hours of time for every hour of meeting they think they might need to create, right? So in that meeting, you're drafting deliverables, you're doing research, you're putting together the agenda, and then after the meeting, you're digesting it. You could use AI tools to help digest it, but you still need to digest it, update those deliverables, kind of get ready for the next meeting, right? So you're really proactively engaging people, and you're having a really clear structure. Also in the meeting, how can you validate what was accomplished, and really leaving with, here's what we achieved today, here's what our next step is, here's the action items if you need somebody to research something. So just really managing that stakeholder group and being really clear and upfront about communications goes a long way.
Cool. We have actually Samir wanted to ask a question. Samir, if you want to unmute and ask.
Come on.
There you go.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, you just muted yourself again. All right, I think you're good.
Okay.
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Yeah. I was saying thank you, Laura, for the presentation. It's awesome. My question, very fast before I leave, as I have another meeting, it's at 11.
Mhm.
So, this process, we can go. We can use it in every sector, right? Because I was a business analyst before I was introduced to Salesforce, and I did all that for a call center. It was verbally meeting the client and then meeting developers and apply it to the agents, and it wasn't really organized as it is now. But then you can take someone, a business analyst from call center, and he can apply all this process in healthcare facilities, anywhere else, right?
Uh, Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up that question, because I actually meant to speak to that at the very beginning, that as a Salesforce BA, like your BA skills are not limited to the Salesforce ecosystem. And so, yes, like I am not a Salesforce BA. This process was developed to support BAs all across the world in a variety of industries, all different kinds of projects. So like I spoke to the Salesforce pieces here because that's who the audience is. But when I speak at other audiences, I try to either tweak it for them or speak to it more generally. So yes, 100%.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that question.
Laura, are you familiar with universal process notation?
A bit, yes.
All right, I'll take this one. Doug wrote, what are some thoughts on universal process notation? It's recommended in Salesforce's Trailhead for strategy design and business analysis under process mapping modules. The real on that is that Ian Gotts actually helped invent universal process notation and helped write that Trailhead. That doesn't mean that it is not the best way to do some business process mapping, depending on what you're trying to communicate. At the end of the day, business process mapping, in my opinion, is, you have tools in your tool belt, and it is a visual way to communicate something. And sometimes universal process notation is a fantastic way to do that. And sometimes there are other diagramming techniques that are other ways to communicate things really well. But Trailhead is universal process notation because Elements Cloud got in there first. That's pretty much it. Another question for you, Laura. Any suggestions and best practices around defining quantifiable KPIs at the executive level?
Yeah, so that is going to depend, Tony, on where you are at in the organization and what your level of influence is. So, so provided you're like in a senior role with some access to those executives, right, you could start to bring those conversations into those executive meetings and say, here are some of the things I see us focused on. Here's where we could have some KPIs. Let me go kind of create some plans around what it would take to track those, right? That would be a very strategic view. Most business analysts are not like in that scope. And so what we have kind of authority over is within our projects. So when we're looking at a specific initiative or the work that a specific team is doing, what can we quantify that would be relevant given what we know about our organization's overall goals and objectives, even if they're not quantifiable? And so starting to put some quantification around those where possible. I feel like it's just a really hard road though. And I've watched people like push at it over years before they finally get to what they really like, the end game of being able to have good tracking and mapping it to your project portfolio and mapping it to your organizational goals. Like that is it's a whole thing that really needs a whole team on a larger company to focus on. So I just don't want to oversell the ease of that. I hope those suggestions that start you kind of getting thinking of where you might drop in and provide some support. Yeah.
So we have a new one that came into Q&A, how to handle changing requirements along the way, addressing new issues and avoiding tech debt without bloating the project or getting overloaded. I think Dennis could have written a question out of my own head.
All right. So I heard the changing requirements part. The second part, though, was pretty juicy. So it was the second, like, without creating tech debt and...
Yeah, addressing new issues and avoiding tech debt without bloating the project or getting overloaded.
Yeah. So that's where you really have to go back to what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And does this change in requirements actually is it part of solving the problem? Is it extraneous? And so the more agreement you can get on those key metrics or business objectives first, the easier that gets when you're in the like swirl of this isn't what I wanted kind of change. In terms of the tech debt piece, I think that can also be an objective, right? Like what is your organization or your team's capacity, or what would be a good constraint to have as a mindful limit of what that looks like for you, and what do we really mean by tech debt for this team or for this system, and how is that negatively impacting us, and putting some numbers, or at least some communication around it so that people understand what it is and how it's having an impact.
Okay, let's.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I mean, change requests, the change management could be like a whole topic in and of itself. So I was just about to go down another thread, but yeah.
Oh, no. Why don't you go down the thread, and then we'll do one more question.
Yeah, I actually kind of lost it. It's all right.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay,
Go ahead, Vanessa. Yeah.
So we have a question from Kiana and another one from Eileen that I think are along the same vein, where they've been Salesforce admins or the first BA on the Salesforce team. How should they start building out that business analysis practice and positioning themselves as the BA in their company?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is look in your company and also see, is there anyone else doing business analysis like outside Salesforce, right? So look outside of the Salesforce admin team. Are there people that you could connect with to start to build a very informal community of practice within your organization? And then similarly, whether or not that exists, where can you start to just build the set of business analysis practices? So, a version of this 8-step process for how to approach a new initiative as a Salesforce admin. Here are some best practices from BA, like starting to share those. Being really clear and intentional for yourself as much as possible, where you can use the tools as part of your work, like intentionally applying the business analysis techniques and skill sets on your work, capturing that in your resume, and so you're positioning yourself as a business analyst for other opportunities, but also starting to cultivate that awareness of what business analysis is within your company. So just really like owning the BA part. I've also seen people like just rebrand their title as like business, like with a tagline or something, so that you're calling attention to kind of the BA aspect of what you do as an admin. And then, is this a role that you would actually like to have a title change for, a promotion path into? Having those conversations with your manager is a great place to start, just to see what the potential for that is. Like, do they understand the role? And if not, how can you educate them about the role? Do they understand it and are excited about it? How can you help craft the role? Or is it something that's really not a starter in your organization, and you really need to work on your own personal skill set, and then maybe seek opportunities elsewhere where you can be more of a full-fledged business analyst? So there's a lot of potential there, but it starts with your really crystal clearness on your career goal.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. I do love Beach's last thing. What to go for, badmin or analystrator? Maybe not badmin. I think that has other implication.
Oh, okay. It took a second for that to drop in. I'm very literal person. Badmin or
yes, if you're an admin. So thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.
Everybody, go check out Laura's book. It's available on Amazon. It's wonderful. Super appreciate you joining us. And if you'd like to hang out for a bit, Laura, you're welcome to hang out for
I would love to hang out for
and unfiltered chat.
I would love to. Thank you.
How can people find you, Laura, these days?
Yes. Yeah, so my website is very active. I can put a couple links in the chat, as well as I have a YouTube channel that has a ton of resources. My LinkedIn right now is shut down due to a hacker. So eventually I will be back on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you all. In the meantime, my website is the best way to get in touch with me, and I'll put a few links in the chat.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, folks, we've got some Salesforce Badass BA news and opportunities to go through. First, I'm going to keep mentioning it until the end of the year. Free AI certs and training provided by Salesforce through December 2025. After that, the Agentforce Specialist certification will be costing approximately $200, I believe. So if you have some availability to study and get it, I think it's certainly worthwhile, because Agentforce is a thing. In case Salesforce somehow missed you with their marketing. So now, also, speaking of LinkedIn and AI, Pei, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, it's just something that popped up on my newsfeed to say that by November 3rd, LinkedIn will be using all content to train the AI unless you opt out. So I think since 2020, I've written about 4,700 posts, of which half has a diagram like this. I really, really don't want it to be trained and have someone take post something that's not aligned with my values in my style. So I wrote this, and I had some very interesting, spicy conversation with people who obviously do not create and do not see what's wrong with me being very selfish with the stuff that I spent my sweat, blood, and tears to create. So, but anyway, so that was my little beef on LinkedIn. Please turn it off if you feel the same as me. That's it.
Thank you, Pei. And I do feel the same as you, and adjusted my settings accordingly. God damn it, Steve, as my 12-year-old says.
Yeah.
And why don't you keep going then? We've got some other news.
Yes. I've just relaunched Zenha Academy, which is a paid membership community that I run. Now I'm running it with Piyusha. So we're going to have both leadership, human skills, and technical content. So she's a Salesblazer, she's a Slack community leader, and she's also a marketing cloud expert, of which I am not. I can talk about all the other human side of things, but she can do the technical side. So I created this so that people can dig deeper into questions that they care about. So we run every Friday for an hour and a half. Everyone it's like a peer coaching thing that we can practice, and we can role play a lot of things. You can see there. So you got people who care about your success, sharing coaching tips on how you can be better. So that's one. Next slide, please. So we are launching today, and if anyone signs up today, that means by midnight, which is another 7 hours, the subscription is only $99 a month. And I have had a lot of people say that that's really cheap, because essentially you're getting an hour and a half coaching every week from Piyusha and myself, every week. There's a different topic all the time. We will have a Slack community as well. And also the bonuses are £500 off my master class for discovery. So that's very specific to consulting. And we have the AI component, how to use AI to create diagrams and acceptance criteria that is very, very tight, because in consulting, if you don't do things properly, we get into a lot of trouble. So by tomorrow, if you decide tomorrow, then the price goes up to $129 a month. So this is only for today, this particular offer. Next slide, please. If you decide that you don't want to make a decision today, on Tuesday I'm going to run a session that looks like my Friday session for anyone to come and test out. So if you think you're very good at requirements gathering, if you think you're very good at listening, peeling back layers, questioning assumption in a way that doesn't get the other person defensive, then come see how you do. A lot of people are surprised that they miss out things when we do an actual skills practice role play. That's the next LinkedIn Live. That's me and Piyusha, and that's me. Thank you very much for letting me.
And I'm just throwing it out there. Pei's birthday is coming up on October 6th, so if anybody wants to buy a membership as a happy birthday to Pei, I thoroughly encourage it. Good luck on your launch, Pei. And I thought this was important to share with our community. We always want to share important business analyst resources, and besides, of course, all of your paid content and books, I know you do so much of this for free as well, just like you did right before the session, a LinkedIn Live with Pusha. So thank you so much for all the content that you put out there and championing business analysis throughout the Salesforce ecosystem. And our next bit of news, we're celebrating our members. Azim, thank you for the cool shout out. That's not why I'm posting this though. The shout out was lovely, but IIBA is, if folks aren't familiar with it, it's the International Institute of Business Analysis. It is not Salesforce specific. It has thousands upon thousands of members globally, and a member of our own Salesforce BA community was featured. So I encourage folks to learn lessons from one of our wonderful members, and also give him a congratulations because he recently got a new role. So business analysis careers that are inspiring all of us. Congratulations.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. I didn't expect this to show up in this meeting. Luckily, I stayed till the end.
Good. I'm glad you stayed. Congratulations. It was a wonderful write-up. And in also celebrating our members, copying badass. This is a new one that I'm doing because this seemed like an important one to do. So Karat had was doing her BA certification exam, and then there was an earthquake and she had to evacuate, and then came back and passed her BA exam. I don't know if she's actually in the meeting today, but I wanted to make sure that we celebrated what being badass in the Salesforce ecosystem looks like. She's also an MVP and a wonderful person, a wonderful representative of our community. So congratulations on passing that certification exam in the most stressful situations. Calls for speakers. We're always big on making sure that people understand where they can talk about business analysis, because our scope and goals is championing it within the ecosystem, because behind every successful project is a business analyst. So we've got We Dreamin' in Oklahoma City, True Blue Blazing in Melbourne, Cactus Forces coming up, Cairo Dreamin', and Buckeye Dreamin', all still accepting calls for speakers. You can also check the events page on Salesforce's site if you are interested in speaking out some of these locations. And we've got a representative from Mexico Dreamin', who also I think is going to talk about the...
Sure. Mexico Dreaming is going on November 21st. So if you want to come to Mexico City, come and we'll grab some tequila for you.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you, Rodrigo. All right. And if you want to speak to our group, I think we are booked up with some amazing speakers for the rest of this year, but we are collecting submissions for next year, and always happy to showcase new speakers. We've had a couple this year that I've been really excited that we've had, and please feel free to fill out the form and we will check it out and figure out some time for you to come talk to our group. Even if it's just you want to do a 10-minute, like, can I just dip my toe in the water? I'm flexible. All right. With that, I'm going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience, and then we will open it up for our unfiltered chit chat. Bye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.